Hi, I'm Tammy Murphy, and for more than 25 years, I've worked as a realtor and helped families to protect one of their largest investments, their home. Those experiences are what led me to run for Montgomery County Auditor. This episode of the REALTOR podcast helps to explain just some of my advocacy. Hi there and welcome back. I am happy to be coming to you with this Talking Head podcast view. We will be getting back into the studio and getting some normalcy back to our videos for you, but as our real estate podcast channel and all things related to real estate, I want to go ahead and preface this with I'm also going to carry over and cross over into my campaign for Montgomery County Auditor, because this topic this week is so critically important. I cannot be just talking from a real estate perspective. It is absolutely the opportunity and very crucial on the auditor front as well. And hopefully, if you've been watching our REALTOR podcast, you know that I made the formal announcement back in February that I was seeking the office of Montgomery County Auditor because of all of the encouragement and input, and actually all of you reaching out to me saying, hey, we need representation, we want you to be that voice. And carry over now to a few months into this campaign and before the real election cycle kicks in, I'm making headways, growing this grassroots level, and it's really important that those of you who know me, who've been watching over all the years that I've been doing all of the things, my voice is still here to represent you. And as the next county auditor, that is critically important for you to understand and to know and to believe so many things that are going on right now. I thought this was just going to be a June market update because, yes, in our communities, we have seen that pause relate now to transactional shifts, meaning our closings were down for the month of June. That's really important. Our inventory is up for the month of June. And basically, we're back to our 2025 level. And while all of that is certainly important, because if you're looking to buy or sell, this is hot of topic on your mind. But the other hot topic that is always on our mind has become property taxes. And you know that that is a real basis for what my campaign has been pushed out there to represent homeowners and our rights, our equity potential, all in a better way, a new perspective, and hopefully to make some changes going forward in productive manners that still keep our municipalities strong and our communities thriving, but also is no longer the burden to our taxpayers, for our homeowners specifically. And this story that I'm going to share with you on the recent Supreme Court ruling is really a heartbreaking, wrenching setup because of the precedent that it could set. So that being the case, I am putting on all the hats as your realtor advisor, right? As a broker owner, small business, but more importantly as a homeowner myself, and campaign for the Montgomery County Auditor. So all of the things, if you like this message or like any of the messages that you've heard from me, please feel free to like and share, comment below, and do all the things, because that does help to know that we're on target with what we need to be doing, what we need to be focusing in on. And all the hype and build up that I can give for this is just not even going to do it justice as it rolls down. So let me set the stage and let you know exactly what we're going to be talking about. Is one homeowners, their family that took a case to the Supreme Court. And so this is called the Pung case, P-U-N-G, and originally started in Michigan, right? It is a Michigan family home that was owned free and clear. The county's assessment, so their county auditor valued this at just under $195,000. We'll call it under 195, but it's actually 194,400. Important number to know. There was no mortgage on this, and they had accumulated home equity. So this is not a vacant lot. It is not an abandoned property, and it was not a condemned structure. However, it was a family home that had substantial equity. And here's where the property tax dispute came in. And this is what many out there are skipping. It is not that the family forgot to pay the taxes. Instead, this is where the family had received a Michigan principal residence exemption. And after an owner's death, the local assessor revoked that exemption. Automatically goes through, does that. That revocation actually created an additional $2,242 that was due in property taxes. And the family challenged that assessment. They said, hey, this isn't right. Why does it go back? And why is it all of a sudden? And why is it to this extent? They argued that the tax should never have been assessed in the first place. So, Michigan Tax Tribunal actually restored the exemption for those prior years. And then there was another that disputed the assessment remained. And because of that, this led to an unpaid balance that triggered a foreclosure. So a property tax foreclosure was triggered. Now, that county foreclosure meant that those unpaid taxes were going to be claimed, and the county began their statutory tax foreclosure. The home was taken and sold. This is very important because we know that the government can foreclose on your property for unpaid taxes. That authority was never really disputed. However, the dispute came what happened after the property was taken. And at that auction, the county sold the home. The auction price was just over $76,000, $76,008 to be exact. But remember, the county had assessed the value on this home at $194,400 and was collecting taxes at that higher level, which created that burden of the $2,242 that was due. Now, weeks later, the person who bought the home from the auction for $76,000 turned around, sold it for $195,000 without making any improvements, without doing any renovations, and without making any repairs. Basically, bought one day, sold the next, and made this buku $120,000, right? As just a resale. This became the evidence piece that the auction price was below the ordinary market value. And what the family was questioning, not whether or not the government can collect on unpaid property taxes, but the actual question came down to how much compensation is the homeowner constitutionally owed after the government takes and sells the property. So we know that this case had been heard before. Hey, think back to 2023. There was a very important case that went Tyler versus Hennepin County, and in 2023 the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the government cannot simply keep all equity after a tax foreclosure, that if there is money left over, taxes are paid, what's left becomes what the homeowner gets. That was the important decision that came out of the Tyler decision. Fast forward now, here we are 2.5 years later. Tyler's case answered homeowners own their surplus equity, but it did not answer how we calculate that equity. And that unanswered question is what perpetuated here on the Pung case. So, in the federal district court, the government could simply not just keep everything. The court awarded that the estate gained the surplus proceeds from the auction sale, but not the home's full value. And that's what the family was arguing. They said it still was not enough. Their argument was that if our house was worth $194,400 by the county auditor's assessment, and that's what we've been taxed on, and that's what created this additional tax that was suddenly due that we were fighting, and you, the county, sold it for $76,000. You can't create a bargain sale off of my home just to get your taxes and not give me ample compensation. So their position was simple. Their just compensation should be based upon that fair market value and not the distressed auction value. Very important ruling that took place, because could it be that if I sell it at a fire sale and you are out your equity, your money, everything that you've been paying? Consider if you've paid a 30-year loan off and now you're out all of that money because they sell it at a reduced price, how much of a burden and actually how much of a theft that feels like to you, right? So the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals disagreed, and they ruled that the proper measure was the auction sale proceeds, because they're saying it's not a hypothetical market value. That is what brought a true buyer forward. The family appealed, and that's what sent this case to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court question, they were not deciding whether taxes must be paid. They were deciding, when government sells your property, what is just compensation to the homeowner. The court's answer, surprisingly, was a unanimous decision. And a unanimous decision means that all of those justices said, this is the way it is. Now, they also have some additional commentary that they provide, which maybe gives us a look to why this is not fully closed out yet. So Justice Alito wrote that the court held for a fairly conducted tax sale, the constitutional baseline for compensation is the auction price, not an appraised fair value. This is now our new constitutional precedent as a rule. So going forward, everything is going to go off of that baseline, that if the auction price only brings $20,000 to the table for that sale of that home, that is going to be considered the new fair value for that home, and your compensation as the homeowner isn't going to be off of what you've paid a mortgage for and all the years of payments and all the property taxes based on a higher number. It's going to be based off of that auction price. This is really important for people to understand, because this is what many people are missing. The court did not say that every auction is fair. They sent the case back to determine whether this particular auction process was conducted fairly. And that issue is what remains open in the lower courts. This is a very important, credible piece that needs to be figured out, because if they just do the fire sale and they just clear it to get their money, is that then the right thing for the homeowner who has paid out all the money, who has paid off a mortgage, who has paid all these property taxes based off a much higher figure, and they get nothing, which is the case that we've heard here locally, that people don't even get any of the value of the money back. That is a problem, right? So Justice Thomas concurred with an outcome, with the actual legal outcome, but he questioned the county's conduct. And he said in his initial view that the county's actions were wrong, that they likely were unconstitutional under historical practice because it seized and sold the entire property rather than attempting less drastic means of collecting the debt. This concurrence is what signals the broader constitutional debate that is not necessarily over. What does that mean? Because if the county is taking the property and they're looking to benefit off of the sale, and they only want to get their money out of it, and there is no just compensation for the homeowner and their equity and what they are owed, This is a real problem, and I see this as a warning. I see this as something we all need to really pay attention to. I'm paying attention to it as a realtor, as a homeowner myself, but more importantly, as seeking that role of the future county auditor. This is a very important piece that needs to be heard and understood, is that as a homeowner, you must do everything you can. As much as we disagree with how these property taxes are currently, that if the tax is owed, you don't want it to go to the county taking the home back, and you don't want that to proceed to an auction where everything is lost. You have a much harder battle at that point, so let's do everything ahead of that to protect you. And I say yes, our county should absolutely be more proactive in helping owners to stay in their properties, and especially opening up that dispute window for when property tax values seem to be not fitting what is actually going on. All of this being said, the biggest lesson is so practical here that if a property reaches tax foreclosure, your constitutional protection may now depend heavily on what the price is obtained at that tax auction, and assuming that the sale is fairly conducted. That makes preventing tax foreclosure more important than ever. That's the critical thing we need to be doing. So why does this matter to me? Because I represent you as a buyer, as a seller, as a particular owner in our community, as potentially a constituent of mine when I'm elected as your next county auditor, that I want to make sure I'm working with you and protecting those property rights. So very important. Not only protecting the property rights, but protecting your equity, protecting that future generational wealth that you're looking to build, and just what you are paying, and is it fair, and does it make sense? It can't be a low number on this hand and a high number on this hand, and you, the person who's doing all of those, what are the numbers, benefit on both sides, right? So we need to make sure that the system works accurately, that it is set to where the people can keep home ownership and work towards that equity potential. This is something I need for you to understand. As a realtor, I've spent my career helping families to build equity, not lose it. This case isn't a lesson about avoiding taxes. It's a reminder that homeowners need accurate assessments, transparent government, a meaningful notice, and fair opportunities to resolve disputes, and every possible protection before the equity they've built over a lifetime is put at risk. I promise this is one of my most important platform pieces, is to represent you, to be that voice, helping you as a realtor or helping you as the auditor in the future. I want to make sure that you understand this does not go away with that elected role. This should be critical. It should be something that you demand accountability for. And I just knew that this message was so important and so timely right now that I had to bring this out. We're going to get back to our regular programming and in our studio and all the good things and discussing all the things that are going on. And I do try to keep the real estate side separate from my campaign side. But as you can see, there is so much that crosses over. This is my wheelhouse as a realtor, and this is why being your next auditor is so critically important, because I understand I have a different perspective, and I want to make sure that our people and their voices are being heard and represented. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
Thanks for joining us today on the Realty Podcast. If you enjoyed the knowledge and entertainment today, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be embarking on a journey that bridges the gap between realtors and clients, uncovering the heart and tea of real estate.